World knows, the British colonized India the longest. But the real truth shocked you. They were not Britishers. Someone else. Year 1419. Portugal. Prince Henry, the navigator, was a Portuguese prince and patron of exploration who played a key role in the Age of Exploration. Although he never sailed himself, he funded and organized expeditions along the African coast and established a navigation school that helped advance European exploration. Vasco da Gama was the one of the product from this navigator school. Portugal sent spies and traders to gather information about the Indian Ocean trade. Arab and Indian traders had dominated the spice trade, and Vasco da Gama studied their navigation techniques and trade networks. The arrival of Vasco da Gama, 1498, a new gateway to India. In the year 1497, King Manuel I, driven by the ambition to break the Venetian and Arab monopoly over the spice trade. Manuel selects Vasco da Gama for this historic mission. He entrusts him with the responsibility of securing trade relations and ensuring Portugal's dominance in the spice trade. Preparing for the journey, the Armada of Portugal. Vasco da Gama started his voyage with São Gabriel, the flagship, under Vasco da Gama's command. São Rafael, commanded by his brother, Paulo da Gama. Barrio, a swift and agile scouting vessel. A supply ship laden with provisions, weapons, and gifts intended for the rulers of India. Cheers erupt as the Portuguese fleet inches closer to the Malabar coast of India. The journey, perilous and unforgiving, has finally led them to the legendary land of spices. History has been made. The humiliation of Vasco da Gama, a seed of revenge. The Grand Royal Court of Zammarin in Calicut, India, is filled with the murmurs of nobles, traders, and advisors. The hall is adorned with golden pillars and intricate tapestries, showcasing the wealth of the kingdom. He stands before the mighty Zammarin of Calicut, presenting the gifts he has brought from Portugal, cloth, beads, and glassware. Seated on his ornate throne, the Zammarin inspects the offerings with a bemused expression. He lifts a piece of cloth, then tosses it aside with clear disdain and waving a dismissive hand. Vasco da Gama steps forward aggressively, his pride wounded. The Zammarin bursts into laughter, shaking his head. The words cut deep, shattering Vasco da Gama's vision of Portuguese dominance. His face darkens as he storms out of the court, his men trailing behind him. The humiliation burns in his heart, planting the seed of revenge that will one day set Calicut ablaze. Year 1502. The birth of a conqueror, Vasco da Gama's return. Years had passed, but the sting of humiliation still burned in Vasco da Gama's heart. King Manuel had sent Vasco da Gama to establish Portuguese dominance in India, to secure the riches of the East, yet the explorer had returned empty-handed. Vasco da Gama sailed to India for the second time with 15 ships and 800 men, arriving at Calicut on October 30th, 1502. The journey to Calicut had been arduous, but the true wound had been inflicted not by the sea, but by the Zammarin of Calicut, who had mocked Portugal's gifts, dismissed their offers of trade, and refused them any special rights. It was an insult that Vasco da Gama could not forget. The Indian Ocean, vast and untamed, would belong to Portugal. If Calicut refused to bow through diplomacy, it would kneel through force. The spice trade, controlled for centuries by the Arabs and the Venetians, would soon flow only through Portuguese hands. And in time, all of India would come to understand the might of the Iberian kingdom. King Manuel had chosen Vasco da Gama for his boldness, his vision, and now that fire burned brighter than ever. The Calicut ruler showed willingness to sign a treaty, but Gama bombarded the city and captured several rice vessels after he was informed that the Zammarin was messaging neighboring rulers to join him in resisting the Portuguese at the same time. While in India, Gama also attacked Wanner, reduced Batakala to tributary status, established a trade treaty and trading post at Cannanore, and clashed with a fleet belonging to the Zamarin at the Battle of Calicut of 1503. The Arabian Sea churned violently as 20 heavily armed Portuguese warships cut through the dark waters toward Calicut. The coast of Calicut appeared on the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The bustling port was alive with trade, as Indian merchants loaded sacks of spices onto wooden ships, oblivious to the storm about to descend upon them. The city had long been a hub of commerce, where traders from Arabia, Persia, China, and beyond exchanged goods in a thriving marketplace. But to Vasco da Gama, Calicut was a prize to be claimed, not a city of peace. Without warning or declaration, the Portuguese warships unleashed hell. Fire spread swiftly, leaping from burning merchant ships to warehouses stacked with precious goods. The streets, once filled with the lively voices of traders, now echoed with screams of terror. Men, women, and children fled in all directions, their faces twisted in horror as the city was engulfed in flames. Portuguese soldiers stormed the docks, their swords flashing under the firelit sky, their rifles cracking through the smoke. Merciless and relentless, they cut down anyone in their path. Traders, dockworkers, innocent bystanders. No one was spared. Blood mixed with the salt of the sea, staining the shores red. The port of Calicut, which had once humiliated him by rejecting Portugal's trade demands, now burned in submission. The Zamarin of Calicut, who had once dismissed Portuguese influence, would now learn the cost of defiance. The Portuguese now ruled the seas, and no one who stood against them would be spared. Year 1510. The fall of Goa, Portugal claims its first Indian territory. Off the western coast of India, a fleet of Portuguese warships loomed over the horizon, their sails billowing against the strong Arabian sea winds. At the helm of the fleet stood Afonso de Albuquerque, the ruthless and ambitious commander of Portugal's expanding empire. His eyes were fixed upon the golden coastline of Goa, a land that remained under the control of the Bijapur Sultanate. The once peaceful coastline erupted in chaos as Goan forts trembled under the relentless bombardment. Inside the city, Bijapur warriors prepared for the onslaught, but the battle was relentless. The Bijapur warriors fought fiercely, their numbers great, but they could not hold the invaders back. The Portuguese forces were disciplined, ruthless, and heavily armed. One by one, the defenders fell under the Portuguese steel. The Sultanate's forces, unable to withstand the onslaught, began to retreat. What had once been a thriving city of trade and culture was now a battlefield of destruction. As the final resistance crumbled, the Portuguese flag was hoisted above the city, its red and white colors fluttering victoriously over the ruins. The battle was over. Goa had fallen. The Portuguese soldier raised his sword, giving him only two choices, conversion or death. The conquest of Goa had begun, and with it, a new chapter of foreign rule, forced conversions, and the reshaping of India's western coast. The Portuguese had secured their foothold, and for the next 4.5 centuries, Goa would remain under European dominion. Vasco da Gama wrote a letter to the King of Portugal. The Indians are weak, they are divided, they do not understand war. With our guns, our ships, and our faith, we shall rule them all. Portugal came first, but Britain was watching. The fall of Goa was just the beginning. India was heading towards centuries of foreign rule, but one day, she would rise again. Jan Huygen van Linschoten was a Dutch spy, merchant, traveler, and writer. He traveled extensively along the East Indies regions under Portuguese influence and served as the Archbishop's secretary in Goa between 1583 and 1588. He is credited with publishing in Europe important classified information about Asian trade and navigation that was hidden by the Portuguese. During his stay in Goa, he meticulously copied the secret charts page by page. Even more crucially, he provided nautical data like currents, deeps, islands, and sandbanks that were vital for safe navigation, along with coastal depictions to guide the way. The publication of the navigational routes enabled the passage to the East Indies to be open to trading by the Dutch, French, and the English. As a consequence, the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company would break the 16th century monopoly enjoyed by the Portuguese on trade with the East Indies. Year 1595. The Dutch arrive in India. The Dutch plan to break Portugal's monopoly. 1595, inside the Grand Chamber of the States General of the Netherlands, a heated discussion unfolds. Dutch merchants, naval commanders, and politicians have gathered with one goal: to break Portugal's century-old monopoly over the spice trade. The air is thick with frustration, for the Portuguese have grown wealthy from Indian spices, while other European nations are forced to buy at exorbitant prices. The solution is clear. The room erupts in murmurs as explorers and cartographers unroll a stolen Portuguese map, a highly classified document acquired through espionage in Goa and Lisbon. It reveals the exact trade routes, the monsoon patterns, and the key ports where Portugal's power is strongest. The decision is made. A fleet, led by the ambitious Cornelis de Houtman, will set sail for India, marking the beginning of the Dutch journey to the east. The ships are stocked with provisions, cannons, and fine Dutch textiles meant for trade. The first Dutch fleet departs from Amsterdam in 1595, carrying not just sailors and merchants, but the ambitions of an entire nation. Between 1602 and 1795, East Indiamen made a total of 4,800 voyages. Year 1596. First attempt, the Dutch arrive in India, Calicut, Kozhikode, Kerala. By the time the Dutch fleet reaches the Malabar coast in 1596, the scene before them is one of prosperity. Cornelis de Houtman and his men disembark, their eyes filled with hope and determination. They move cautiously through the bustling spice market, where the scent of cloves and dried chilies lingers in the air. The Portuguese rule the spice trade with an iron fist. Cornelis de Houtman quickly realizes that trade in Calicut will not be easy. The Portuguese are too powerful here. If the Dutch want to establish themselves in India, they will need more than silver and textiles. They will need power, strategy, and alliances. Understanding that their first attempt has failed, the Dutch retreat from Calicut. But they are not discouraged. Instead, they turn their sights to a bigger plan, one that will change the course of history. Year 1602, the birth of the Dutch East India Company, VOC. Dutch recognized that to compete with Portugal, they must be more than independent traders. They need a unified front, an organization that has the power to sign treaties, wage war, and dominate trade in the East. Future Governor-General Peter Botha proposes a revolutionary idea. Instead of individual merchants competing against each other, all Dutch trade with the East will be unified under one entity, the Verenigd Oost-Indisch Company, VOC, or the Dutch East India Company. On March 20th, 1602, the VOC is officially granted its charter, making it the world's first multinational corporation with its own military. With access to warships, private armies, and government backing, the Dutch are now ready to challenge the Portuguese Empire in India. The VOC wastes no time. New fleets are dispatched, but this time, the Dutch are armed not just with goods, but with guns, cannons, and a strategy to undermine Portuguese dominance. The Dutch return with power, Masulipatam. By 1605, the Dutch have learned from their past mistakes. Instead of confronting the Portuguese in their strongholds, they seek out independent Indian rulers who are eager to free themselves from Portuguese influence. Their fleet, led by Admiral Stephen van der Hagen, arrives at Masulipatam, a strategic port on the Coromandel coast. Unlike Calicut, Masulipatam is not under Portuguese control, but rather under the rule of the Qutb Shahi Sultanate of Golconda. Approaching the Sultan's court, the Dutch present themselves as peaceful traders, offering gifts of silver and textiles. They assure the Sultan's advisors that, unlike the Portuguese, They do not seek to convert or impose foreign rule. The Portuguese have long demanded tribute and have used military force to maintain control. The Dutch, however, promise only fair trade and mutual benefit. Recognizing an opportunity to weaken Portuguese influence, the Sultan grants the Dutch permission to establish a trading post in Masulipatam. The Dutch finally have a foothold in India. The first VOC factory is established in 1605, marking the beginning of Dutch expansion. Dutch expansion, the rise and fall. With their first success in India, the Dutch expand aggressively. Over the next few decades, they establish new trading posts and forts. Pulicat, 1610, becomes the VOC's headquarters in India, replacing Portuguese influence. Surat, 1616, a major Dutch hub, securing control over Indian textiles. Chinchura, 1653, strengthening Dutch dominance in Bengal's spice and silk trade. Nagapattinam, 1658, further securing control over the southern coast. For a time, it seems like the Dutch will overtake the Portuguese in India. But another power is rising in the shadows, the British East India Company. Portuguese monopoly, the blockade of India, Goa. In the heart of Goa, the Portuguese Viceroy's Grand Palace stands as a symbol of European dominance in India. Viceroy Matthias de Albuquerque got the news of Dutch and English ships sighted near the Cape of Good Hope, their intent clear, to challenge Portuguese dominance. But the Portuguese Cartas system is in place. For nearly a century, no ship has been allowed to enter Indian waters without a Portuguese-issued permit. Any vessel attempting to trade without authorization is seized or sunk. With fortresses in Goa, Cochin, and Dio, the Portuguese hold an iron grip over the spice trade. Far away, in the Arabian Sea, a Dutch ship attempts to enter an Indian port. But before it can dock, Portuguese warships intercept it, their cannons thundering. The Dutch ship is forced to retreat, marking yet another failed attempt to break through Portugal's monopoly. For now, Portuguese control remains unchallenged. But in the shadows, a new era is beginning, one that will soon bring war, betrayal, and the fall of the first European empire in India. The Portuguese built several forts along the Goan coast to protect their territory from Dutch, British, and Maratha invasions. Rees Mugos Fort, 1551, used to defend the Mandovi River, now a cultural and heritage center. Aguada Fort, 1612, overlooking the Arabian Sea, it once had a massive water reservoir and a lighthouse. Cabo de Rama Fort, Portuguese rebuilt in 1763, a scenic yet historic fort with stunning sea views. 1602, the headquarters of the newly established Dutch East India Company, VOC, is alive with heated discussions. The Portuguese may have ruled the seas for a century, but their empire is weakening. The Dutch strategists have studied Portugal's declining strength. If they can capture key ports like Cochin, Pulicat, and Sri Lanka, they can control the spice trade. The VOC is no ordinary trading company. It is a militarized empire, equipped with warships, private armies, and a mandate to wage war in the name of profit. By 1604, the Dutch launched their first major naval assault on Portuguese-controlled Cochin. The Malabar coast erupts into battle as a fleet of 20 heavily armed Dutch warships arrives under the cover of darkness. On the ground, Portuguese soldiers fight desperately, but the Dutch forces overwhelm them. The fortress walls are breached, and within hours, the Portuguese garrison is defeated. The Portuguese monopoly has suffered its first major defeat. Over the next 60 years, the Dutch relentlessly crush Portuguese resistance, capturing Pulicat, 1610, Nagapattinam, 1658, and finally, Cochin, 1663. The once mighty Portuguese naval dominance in India is shattered, and Dutch power rises over the spice trade. But as the Dutch celebrate their victory, another power is silently building its empire, the British. Year 1608. British, first Mughal encounter. British, still new to Indian waters, arrive at the Mughal-controlled port of Surat. Unlike the Dutch and Portuguese, who seize power through military might, the British take a different approach: diplomacy. A fleet led by Captain William Hawkins anchors at the port, its sails billowing in the humid Indian air. In August 1608, William Hawkins landed in Surat, but the Portuguese kidnapped him as soon as his ship, the Hector, came in. Hawkins was told that the King of Portugal owns all of the ports and that no one may enter India without permission from the Portuguese king. The captain was able to obtain a pass for his voyage to Agra in some way. From Surat, William Hawkins traveled to Agra to serve at the court of Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Hawkins presents a letter from King James I of England to the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. He pleaded for trade rights, promising peaceful commerce. But the Portuguese have already warned the Mughals against the English, branding them untrustworthy pirates. However, Hawkins is prepared. Instead of demands, he offers wealth, chests of silver, fine English wool, and rare European goods. The Mughal governor, intrigued, agrees to allow the British to trade in Surat. By 1612, the first British factory is officially established, marking the entry of the British into Indian trade. But as their influence grows, so does Portuguese hostility. Conflict is inevitable. The British defeat the Portuguese. By 1612, tensions reach a breaking point. The British, refusing to pay for a Portuguese cartas, trade permit, openly challenge Portuguese authority in Indian waters. Enraged, a Portuguese fleet attacks a British ship near Surat, determined to crush the English before they gain a foothold. The news of the British victory reaches the Mughal court. Impressed by British resilience, Emperor Jahangir himself grants the British tax-free trade rights in Surat in 1615. With imperial backing, the British East India Company solidifies its position. The Portuguese have lost their most valuable Indian trading post, and their grip on Indian commerce begins to slip. Year 1663. The final blow to Portuguese power. By 1663, the Portuguese Empire in India is in ruins. The Dutch rule the spice trade, and the British have gained control over key Mughal ports. The once mighty cartas system is broken, and Portuguese influence is reduced to a fraction of its former glory. But the final blow comes in 1759 at the Battle of Chinchura. In a dramatic turn of events, the British defeat the Dutch, securing Bengal as their own. The Battle of Chinchura, also known as the Battle of Bidera or the Battle of Hooghly, took place on November 25, 1759 near Chinchura during the 7 Years' War. It was fought between forces of the British East India Company, EIC, and the Dutch East India Company, VOC, the latter of whom had been invited in 1759 by the Nawab of Bengal, Mir Jafar, to help him expel the EIC and establish the VOC as the leading European power in Bengal. The British flag rises over Fort St. George, Madras, Fort William, Calcutta, and Bombay. The final chapter of Portuguese dominance in India is written in blood. India, once the richest land in the world, has become the battlefield for European empires. But as one empire falls, another rises. And soon it will be the British who rule India not as traders but as conquerors. Year 1757. Battle of Plassey and Lute. Robert Clive was a British military officer and colonial administrator who played a key role in establishing British rule in India. He led the Battle of Plassey, 1757, defeating the Nawab of Bengal, Suraj-ud-Dowlah, through treachery and bribery to Mir Jafar, the commander-in-chief of the Nawab's army, and also promised to make him Nawab of Bengal. This victory allowed the East India Company to take control of Bengal. Clive was infamous for looting India's wealth. After Plassey, he seized treasures worth approximately £2.5 million, equivalent to billions today, from Bengal. He personally took £234,000 in cash and a Jagier land grant, worth £27,000 per year. His policies and plunder drained Bengal's economy, contributing to the Great Bengal Famine, 1770. Accused of corruption in Britain, Clive defended himself but later died by suicide in 1774. Year 1760. The final blow to the French. Tamil Nadu stretches wide under the scorching Indian sun. The French army, commanded by General Thomas Lally, stands in formation alongside their Indian allies. Their forces are determined. Bengal may have been lost, but the French will not let the British take South India. Across the field, the British army, under General Sir Eyre Coote, prepares for battle. Their artillery is positioned, their troops disciplined. General Thomas Lally urges his men forward, desperate for a breakthrough. But the British, using superior tactics and artillery, push the French into a chaotic retreat. The battle is over, the French forces in India are defeated. The dream of a French empire in India is crushed, leaving Britain as the sole European power on the subcontinent. Year 1764. The Battle of Buxar. 7,000 British East India Company troops faced a massive 40,000-strong army led by Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, Nawab Mir Qasim of Bengal, and Nawab Shuja'ud-Daulah of Awadh. The Allies aimed to stop British expansion in India. Despite their numbers, the Mughal forces were poorly coordinated. British artillery and gunfire quickly broke their lines. By sunset, over 6,000 Mughal soldiers were dead, while British losses were under 850. The British won decisively. Emperor Shah Alam II was captured and later signed the Treaty of Allahabad, 1765, granting the British taxation rights over Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This marked the beginning of British rule in India. Year 1775 to 1782. The British take Delhi, the First Anglo-Maratha War. The Marathas, led by Mahaji Shinde, Scindia, stand ready for battle. They are determined to protect the emperor and hold Delhi at all costs. The war that follows is long and brutal, stretching for nearly a decade. The British use cunning diplomacy and military strategy, weakening the Maratha resistance. By the end of the First Anglo-Maratha War, 1782, the British secure a peace treaty. Though they do not control Delhi outright, they have gained influence over the Mughal emperor, effectively making him a British puppet ruler. Year 1767 to 1799. The British conquer Mysore, the Four Anglo-Mysore Wars. The city of Srirangapatna, the stronghold of Tipu Sultan, the Tiger of Mysore, is under siege. The British, led by Lord Wellesley, have laid a strategic trap. The Mysorean warriors, fierce and unyielding, fight to the death. Tipu Sultan, known for his bravery and military genius, rallies his men, refusing to surrender. But the British bombard the city relentlessly. The walls of Srirangapatna crumble, and as the British storm the fort, Tipu fights to his last breath. In a final stand, he is killed on the battlefield, marking the end of Mysore's resistance. With his death in 1799, the British secure full control over South India, eliminating the last major obstacle to their complete domination. Year 1803 to 1805. The final Anglo-Maratha War. By the early 1800s, the British set their sights on Delhi, the symbolic heart of India. The Marathas, under Duleep Rao Scindia, make a desperate attempt to stop the British advance. The battle for Delhi in 1803 is intense. The Marathas fight valiantly, but British military discipline, superior artillery, and strategic alliances turn the tide. The Marathas suffer a crushing defeat, and Delhi falls to the British. With the fall of Delhi, the Mughal emperor is placed under direct British protection. The British now rule India in all but name. Year 1858. Far away in London, 1858, the British Parliament convenes. The British East India Company, after a century of conquest and rule, has proven itself incapable of governing India effectively. The recent Indian Rebellion of 1857 has shaken British control, and Parliament makes its final decision. India will no longer be ruled by a corporation, but by the British Crown itself. With a solemn expression, Queen Victoria signs the proclamation. The Union Jack is raised over Delhi, Calcutta, and Madras. The British Raj has begun. The aftermath of the 1857 revolt. The British take full control. The once majestic city of Delhi lies in ruins. The aftermath of the Indian Rebellion of 1857 has turned the Mughal capital into a ghost town. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar II, once the symbolic ruler of India, is now a prisoner of the British. Inside, in a dimly lit chamber, the old and frail emperor sits in chains, his gaze heavy with sorrow. The Mughal Empire, which once stretched across the subcontinent, has fallen. The exploitation of India. The dark days of the British rule. Meanwhile, across the country, poverty deepens. The once prosperous Indian economy, which contributed nearly a quarter of the world's GDP, is now crippled. Famine sweeps through the land, killing millions, while British officials continue to drain India's wealth to fuel their empire. The people of India are oppressed, overtaxed, and starving, but in the shadows, a resistance begins to take shape. Year 1885. The Indian resistance begins. Birth of the Indian National Congress. In Bombay, 1885, a group of Indian intellectuals, activists, and reformers gathers. They speak of economic drain, British oppression, and the need for Indian representation. The idea of a political movement is born. The Indian National Congress is formed. The British, however, take notice. They begin to tighten their grip, determined to crush any signs of rebellion. The Partition of Bengal, Divide and Rule Strategy, 1905. Outside, the streets of Calcutta are flooded with protesters. Indian nationalists, students, and workers march through the city, chanting slogans of unity and resistance. As the boycott gains momentum, bonfires of British textiles burn in towns and villages. The streets are filled with cries of Swadeshi, as Indians reject British products and embrace self-reliance. The protests force the British to reunite Bengal in 1911, but the damage is done. The divide and rule strategy succeeds in deepening religious tensions between Hindus and Muslims, a wound that will haunt India's future. Year 1919. Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. The gardens of Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar, were filled with a peaceful gathering of men, women, and children. They had assembled to protest the Rowlatt Act, which allows the British to imprison Indians without trial. Suddenly, British troops, led by General Reginald Dyer, march in and block the only exit. Within moments, bullets tear through the crowd. Bodies fall, children scream, and blood stains the earth. The firing continues until over 1,000 innocent people lie dead or wounded. News of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre spreads across India, igniting outrage and fury. The people of India no longer trust the British, and the call for independence grows louder than ever. The non-cooperation movement, 1920 to 1922. Mahatma Gandhi leads the struggle. A massive crowd gathers in Ahmedabad, where Mahatma Gandhi stands before thousands of Indians. As the movement spreads, British goods are boycotted, foreign cloth is burned, and Indian workers quit their jobs in British offices. Shops selling British products are shut down, and the Raj feels the impact of mass defiance. The British retaliate with brutal suppression, but for the first time, they are shaken. The world at war. Britain weakens. Britain is at war, fighting for survival against Nazi Germany in Europe and Imperial Japan in Asia. Churchill's ministers warn him of growing unrest in India, where nationalists are mobilizing. But Churchill remains defiant. unwilling to lose Britain's most valuable colony. Across the world, in Delhi, India, the effects of war are brutal. British authorities impose strict wartime measures, seizing food and resources. Famine spreads, and nationalist sentiment boils over. Indian leaders see Britain's weakness as their chance. If Britain cannot govern itself, how can it rule India? Year 1942. The Quit India movement begins. Tens of thousands of Indians gather at Gawaliya Tank Maidan, now August Kranti Maidan, in Bombay. The British authorities panic. If this movement spreads, their grip on India will collapse. Orders are given. The Congress leadership must be arrested before it's too late. Gandhi, his face calm and resigned, is arrested and taken to Aga Khan Palace in Pune. Elsewhere, Nehru, Patel, and other leaders are dragged away in chains. Nehru, from his cell in Ahmednagar Fort, writes in his journal, "The British Empire is collapsing, but they do not know it yet." Across India, chaos erupts. People rise in rebellion. Train stations, post offices, and police stations burn. The British retaliate with brutality. World War II turns against Britain. India becomes a priority. By 1945, the world has changed. The war has drained Britain's economy. Germany has surrendered, Japan is collapsing, and Britain is bankrupt. Across the ocean, in India, the British Viceroy receives new orders. In Delhi, 1946, Lord Mountbatten arrives as the new Viceroy of India. His mission is clear: oversee the transfer of power. In the Indian Parliament Hall, August 14, 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru ready to address the nation. His speech, Tryst with Destiny, carries the weight of centuries of struggle. As the clock strikes midnight, Nehru announces, "India will awake to life and freedom." At Mountbatten House, the final papers of British withdrawal are signed. Lord Mountbatten hands over India's independence declaration to Nehru. Simultaneously, in Karachi, August 14, 1947, Muhammad Ali Jinnah addresses the people of Pakistan. "Pakistan is born," he declares. But independence comes with a heavy cost. As the British leave, violence erupts. Trains filled with Hindu and Muslim refugees are massacred. Entire villages are set aflame. Nearly 1 million people are killed, and 15 million are displaced. The final moment, India rises. August 15, 1947, Red Fort, Delhi. At Red Fort, Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru raises the Indian flag for the first time. The air is electric with cheers, tears, and songs of freedom. The British lower their flag for the last time, as the Union Jack is replaced by the tricolor of India. In that moment, after 200 years of British rule, India is finally free. The British have drained $45 trillion from India. Today, India is the 5th largest economy in the world. Year 1961. Brutal, evil colonizer refused to leave in 1947. Though India is widely celebrated for gaining independence from British rule on August 15, 1947, the truth remains incomplete. In reality, India was not fully free in 1947, as key territories, most notably Goa, Daman, and Diu, remained shackled under Portuguese colonial rule. Despite years of diplomatic efforts, Portugal clung stubbornly to its last fragments of empire. It was only in December 1961 that the Indian Armed Forces launched Operation Vijay, a bold and decisive campaign that brought an end to over 4 centuries of Portuguese control. On December 18, 1961, with the liberation of Goa and its sister territories, the last foreign flag was torn down from Indian soil. Only then did India truly become whole, sovereign, unified, and free in every sense. Ironically defeated by the very land they once claimed, the Portuguese, first to arrive, were the last to fall.